Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. In the year of our Lord 1812, when Beau Brummel still dictated the proper fold of a cravat and the Prince Regent's waistcoats expanded in direct proportion to the national debt, there lived a gentleman whose pride was matched only by his fortune. And, dear reader, in this same green and pleasant land resided a young woman whose circumstance of birth placed her far below his notice, yet whose spirit would eventually bring him to his knees. I speak, of course, of Lord Constantine Farrington, heir to the dukedom of Westmoreland, whose golden curls and azure eyes caused many a maiden to reach for her vinaigrette, and of Miss Nora Matthews, daughter of a country parson with little to recommend her but quick wit and uncommonly fine eyes, which, between you and me, is recommendation enough for those with sense to recognize it. Their first encounter, as is often the case with the most passionate of love stories, was not auspicious. Indeed, if Lady Whistledown had been present to document the occasion, she might have predicted nothing but mutual antipathy for the pair. It was during a spring assembly in the village of Little Thornfield, where Lord Constantine found himself trapped by an unseasonable downpour while traveling to his family's country estate. The local gentry, beside themselves at hosting nobility in their humble assembly rooms, made a tremendous fuss, which only served to inflate the already substantial ego of the young lord. I cannot imagine a more tedious fate, he drawled to his companion, Viscount Halsey, loud enough for half the room to hear, than to be imprisoned by rain in a backwater where the local belles consider muslin from last season the height of fashion. Miss Nora Matthews, standing not 3 paces away, felt her cheeks burn. The simple string of pearls at her throat, her mother's pearls, her only treasure, suddenly felt like a brand marking her as provincial and beneath notice. I cannot imagine a more tedious fate, she replied with deceptive sweetness, than to be imprisoned with a gentleman who mistakes wealth for worth and lineage for likability. The assembly room fell silent. Lord Constantine turned, one elegant eyebrow raised, to behold the impertinent speaker. What he saw momentarily stole his practiced composure. A young woman with chestnut hair and flashing eyes, dressed simply but with an innate grace that even his fastidious eye could not fault. "And you are?" he inquired, ice dripping from each syllable. "No one of consequence," she replied with a curtsy precise enough to be proper, yet shallow enough to border on insult. "Merely a country nobody who prefers honest speech to polished manners without substance." Something flashed in Lord Constantine's eyes. Anger, certainly, but perhaps a flicker of something else. Amusement? Interest? Whatever it was, it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold disdain. "Then allow me to respond with honest speech, Miss Nobody. Your pearls are false, your hair unfashionably arranged, and your impertinence suggests a desperate bid for attention rather than true wit." And then, oh, dear reader, prepare yourself. He reached out, and, with one flick of his aristocratic finger, snapped the string that held Nora's modest pearls. They scattered across the wooden floor, bouncing and rolling into corners as the assembled company gasped in horror. "Constantine!" Lord Halsey exclaimed, genuinely shocked. "That was unconscionable." But the damage was done. As Nora dropped to her knees to retrieve the scattered heirlooms, Constantine Farrington turned on his heel and strode from the assembly room, pausing only to drop several gold guineas onto a side table. "For the lady's trinket," he said coldly, "though I dare say the gold exceeds its worth." The local matrons immediately clustered around poor Nora, clucking like mother hens over a wounded chick. "The arrogance," declared Mrs. Pembroke, the butcher's wife. "The cruelty," agreed Mrs. Hartley, who had 7 unmarried daughters and therefore considered herself an expert on the failings of eligible men. Nora, however, gathered her pearls with quiet dignity, her eyes dry even as her hands trembled slightly. When she stood, she pocketed the scattered beads and looked toward the door where Lord Constantine had exited. "He is precisely the sort of man," she said clearly, "that I shall make a point to avoid for the remainder of my days." Ah, but dear listener, we all know how the fates delight in making mockery of such declarations. For while Nora Matthews fully intended never to cross paths with the insufferable Lord Constantine again, the universe, and this humble chronicler, had other plans entirely. 5 years passed. 5 years in which Constantine Farrington ascended to his dukedom following his father's untimely passing. 5 years in which he grew from a thoughtless young buck into a man of influence, if not yet wisdom. 5 years in which Nora Matthews suffered the loss of her beloved father and found herself in the unenviable position of companion to her distant cousin, Lady Agatha Templeton, a widow with a sharp tongue and an even sharper eye for social climbing. The season of 1817 found them all in London, where Lady Agatha had dragged Nora in her relentless pursuit of a suitable match for her insipid daughter, Georgiana. Though Nora was now 23, practically on the shelf by society's cruel reckoning, her beauty had only deepened with maturity. The quick wit remained, though tempered now by grief and experience. It was at Lady Harrington's ball, a crush of the first order, where their paths crossed again. The Duke of Westmoreland, as Constantine was now known, entered the ballroom to the usual flutter of excitement. Unmarried ladies adjusted their décolletage. Ambitious mammas mentally calculated his annual income. Gentlemen of lesser rank decided whether to curry favor or affect indifference. Nora, standing dutifully beside the refreshment table while Georgiana danced with a baronet of modest means but excellent teeth, observed his entrance with a detached curiosity. She had heard of his elevation, of course. All of England had, but had given him little thought in the intervening years. Still insufferably handsome, she murmured to herself, but now with the added confidence of a dukedom. Heaven help us all. What she did not know, could not know, was that Constantine Farrington carried with him a small velvet pouch containing 27 pearls, collected from the floor of a country assembly room 5 years prior. He had kept them as a reminder of his worst self, a talisman against the entitled cruelty that had once defined him. The death of his father had changed Constantine profoundly. Thrust into responsibility, confronted with the legacy of noblesse oblige that his ancestors had upheld for generations, he had been forced to reckon with his own character, and found it wanting. As his gaze swept the ballroom, bored, as was his custom at such events, it snagged on a face that sent an unexpected jolt through his system. Those eyes, that proud tilt of the chin. The memory crashed over him with the force of a wave. The country assembly, the cruel words, the scattered pearls. Good God, he muttered, color draining from his face. What is it? Inquired Lady Elizabeth Cromwell, the diamond of the season who had been angling for his attention all evening. You look as though you've seen a ghost. Not a ghost, Constantine replied absently. A reckoning. He moved through the crowd with purpose, leaving Lady Elizabeth gaping in his wake. Society matrons parted before him like the Red Sea before Moses, but Constantine saw nothing but the woman in the simple ivory gown who was now regarding his approach with dawning recognition and unmistakable dismay. Miss Matthews, he said, executing a bow of perfect depth and duration. Nora cursed, her face a masterpiece of polite indifference that did not reach her eyes. Your Grace, you remember me. I make it a point to remember those who destroy my property, Your Grace. It happens so rarely, you see. A muscle ticked in Constantine's jaw, not from anger, but from shame. I deserve that. You deserve considerably more, but we are in polite company. The Duke's lips twitched. Would you do me the honor of dancing the next set? I believe it is a country dance. So you might tread on my toes as effectively as you once trampled my dignity? No thank you, Your Grace. I have apologized to many people for many transgressions in recent years, Miss Matthews. But the one apology I have most wished to offer has been to you. Nora regarded him with frank skepticism. And it took 5 years and a chance encounter at Lady Harrington's ball to deliver this burning apology? I did not know where to find you, he admitted. I inquired after you in Little Thornfield the following year, but the parsonage had a new occupant who knew nothing of your whereabouts. This gave Nora pause. The idea that the mighty Duke of Westmoreland had sought her out was unsettling. You inquired after me? With a velvet pouch containing 27 pearls and a conscience considerably heavier than both. Across the ballroom, Lady Agatha was gesturing frantically for Nora to join her, no doubt to assist in some matrimonial scheme for Georgiana. Nora ignored her. You kept them? She asked, her voice softer now. As a reminder of the man I do not wish to be. The orchestra struck up the opening notes of the country dance. Constantine extended his hand, a question in his eyes. "One dance," Nora conceded. "And then you will tell me why the mighty Duke of Westmoreland carries a humble parson's daughter's broken necklace for half a decade." And so they danced. The ton whispered behind fans and quizzing glasses. Who was this unknown beauty who had captured the Duke's attention? Lady Elizabeth Cromwell sulked magnificently. Lady Agatha nearly swooned at the prospect of her cousin's sudden social elevation. But Constantine and Nora saw only each other, moving through the figures of the dance with matched grace, their conversation continuing in snatches between movements. "After my father died, I was sorry to hear. Lady Agatha is my mother's cousin. I have a townhouse in Grosvenor Square." When the music ended, Constantine did not release her hand. "Walk with me on the terrace," he requested. "There is much I wish to say." The evening air was cool, the garden below scented with roses. A few other couples dotted the terrace, keeping carefully proper distances from one another while their chaperones pretended not to doze on nearby benches. "You said you would explain about the pearls," Nora prompted. Constantine withdrew the velvet pouch from his waistcoat pocket. "I behaved abominably that night. There is no excuse for it." "None," Nora agreed. "Though youth and privilege often conspire to create insufferable men." "Indeed they do." He smiled ruefully. "When my father died unexpectedly, I found myself responsible not just for vast estates and fortunes, but for the livelihoods of hundreds. Tenant farmers, servants, entire villages looking to me for leadership and protection. A heavy burden for one raised to think only of his own pleasure." "Precisely. I discovered that I was woefully unprepared for the role I had been born to fill. In my efforts to become worthy of my position, I was forced to examine the kind of man I had been." He held up the pouch. "These became my touchstone, a reminder of the casual cruelty I was capable of when I valued status above humanity." Nora regarded him thoughtfully. "A pretty speech, Your Grace. But actions speak louder than words, do they not?" "They do indeed. Which is why I have spent these 5 years reforming my father's harshest policies, establishing schools on my estates, and funding hospitals in areas previously neglected by those of my class." "Impressive," Nora conceded. "Though one might argue these are the actions of any decent landlord with sufficient means." Constantine laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his handsome face into something approaching boyish. "You have not changed, Miss Matthews. Still unwilling to be impressed by rank or fortune." "Should I be?" "No," he said simply. "You should not. It is precisely that quality that has haunted me these 5 years." The conversation might have continued in this fascinating vein had Lady Agatha not appeared at that moment, breathless with excitement and social anxiety. "Nora, there you are? I have been searching everywhere." She curtsied deeply to Constantine. "Your Grace, I cannot apologize enough for my cousin's presumption in monopolizing your time." Constantine's face immediately assumed the cool, aristocratic mask that Nora remembered from their first meeting. "No apology necessary, madam. Miss Matthews has been kind enough to renew an old acquaintance." "Old acquaintance?" Lady Agatha looked bewildered. "Nora, you never mentioned knowing the Duke of Westmoreland." "Didn't I?" Nora replied innocently. "How remiss of me." Constantine's eyes gleamed with suppressed amusement. "If I might call upon Miss Matthews tomorrow? I have a family heirloom I believe belongs to her." And so began the courtship that set the ton ablaze with speculation. The Duke of Westmoreland, catch of the season, pursuing a penniless companion with no connections to speak of? Impossible. Yet day after day, his carriage was seen outside Lady Agatha's modest townhouse. Invitations that had never before graced Lady Agatha's mantle suddenly arrived, all including Lady Agatha Templeton, Miss Templeton, and Miss Matthews in elegant script. Lady Agatha, initially suspicious of Constantine's intentions, became his most ardent supporter when she realized the social doors his interest in Nora opened for her precious Georgiana. Within a fortnight, the previously overlooked Miss Templeton had received 2 eligible offers of marriage, one from a viscount with excellent prospects and a full head of hair, which she promptly accepted. Meanwhile, Constantine courted Nora with a determination that surprised even himself. He sent no flashy bouquets or extravagant gifts. He had learned enough of her character to know such gestures would not impress. Instead, he brought her books they discussed in Lady Agatha's drawing room. He escorted both ladies to museums and lectures that Nora had expressed interest in. He listened, truly listened, to her opinions on everything from poetry to politics. And Nora, despite her initial resolve to keep her heart well guarded, found herself charmed by this new Constantine. The arrogance remained, but it was tempered now by genuine concern for others. The wit that had once been deployed to wound was now used to delight. And when he looked at her, well, dear reader, even the most level-headed of women might find her pulse quickening under such focused admiration. 6 weeks into this most unusual courtship, Constantine invited Nora to accompany him on a drive through Hyde Park, properly chaperoned, of course, by his elderly aunt, the formidable Lady Millicent Farrington, who promptly fell asleep the moment the carriage set off. "Your aunt seems an excellent chaperone," Nora observed dryly as the older woman's gentle snores filled the carriage. "She has perfected the art over decades of accompanying young ladies in my family," Constantine replied. "Though I suspect she sleeps more deeply in your case because she approves of you." "Does she? She said you were refreshingly free of both simper and scheme, which from Aunt Millicent constitutes high praise indeed." Nora laughed, then gazed out at the fashionable crowds promenading along the pathways of the park. "Your world is so different from mine, is it? We read the same books, appreciate the same music, value the same qualities in people." "Yes, but you do it all from inside a gilded carriage while wearing boots that cost more than my yearly allowance." Constantine considered this. "Would you refuse me because of my wealth, Nora? Is that an insurmountable barrier between us?" The sudden seriousness of his tone made her turn to face him. "Refuse you? You have not offered me anything to refuse, Your Grace." "Haven't I? I have offered you my time, my thoughts, my sincere admiration. But if you require something more formal..." He reached again for the velvet pouch that he carried always. "I had intended a more romantic setting for this, but perhaps straightforwardness suits us better." Nora's heart began to pound as Constantine opened the pouch and tipped its contents into his palm. There lay her mother's pearls, but transformed. No longer a simple string, they had been reset into an exquisite necklace, the pearls interspersed with small diamonds that caught the afternoon sunlight filtering through the carriage windows. "Constantine," she breathed, using his given name for the first time. "I broke your necklace in contempt," he said quietly. "I offer it back to you in love, if you will have it. If you will have me." Lady Millicent's snores stopped abruptly. "Well?" the old lady demanded, one eye open. "Don't keep us in suspense, girl." Nora looked from the necklace to the man holding it. This complicated, evolving man who had once wounded her pride so deeply and was now offering her his heart with the same intensity. "Yes," she said simply. "Though I warn you, I am unlikely to become a biddable duchess." Constantine's face broke into a grin of such genuine joy that even Lady Millicent blinked in surprise. "I would not want you any other way," he declared. And then, scandal of scandals, he kissed her right there in the carriage, in full view of half the ton. Lady Millicent immediately rapped her cane against the carriage roof. "Drive on," she commanded the coachman. "My nephew appears to have lost all sense of propriety, and I refuse to witness his disgrace." But her eyes twinkled as she said it, and when the carriage doors closed at Constantine's townhouse, she made herself remarkably scarce for a woman of her advanced years and substantial dignity. The wedding of the Duke of Westmoreland to Miss Nora Matthews was the event of the season. Society matrons who had previously snubbed Nora now claimed intimate friendship. Gentlemen who had overlooked her at balls suddenly discovered her remarkable conversational skills, and Lady Agatha preened as though she had personally orchestrated the match instead of initially attempting to discourage it. "Did you ever imagine," Constantine murmured to his bride as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, "when I broke your necklace that night, that you would one day be a duchess?" "Never," Nora replied honestly, "just as you never imagined that a parson's daughter would capture your heart." "The best stories," he said, drawing her fractionally closer than was strictly proper, "are the ones we could never have predicted. And so, dear listener, we leave our Duke and Duchess of Westmoreland to their well-earned happiness. She will keep him honest. He will give her the platform to effect changes she could only have dreamed of from her humble beginnings. Together, they will raise children who understand both privilege and responsibility, wealth and worth. But most importantly, They will love each other with the kind of passion that comes only from seeing someone at their worst, witnessing their growth, and choosing them anyway. Broken necklaces, wounded pride, and all. Now, if you'll excuse me, I spy Lady Whistledown across the ballroom, and I simply must discover what scandal she's uncovered about the Earl of Pembroke and that mysterious widow from Bath.